Hello and welcome to our third and final video for the classical ballet unit. We ended talking about the rivalry between Marie and the two Maries, Camargo and Sal. And now we're moving into the Romantic era. Here's a quote: "A disillusioned reaction against the excess of war and politics, a desire to get away from the grim truth." So there was a lot going on in the world, and specifically in Europe during the Romantic era, and that caused for a change in what was going on stage. Remember, dance is this ephemeral manifestation of what's going on in society. So when we look at the Romantic era, it's going to happen between 1831 and 1870. And we're going to notice a shift from speaking about the monarchy and the gods of the Roman and Greek mythology to speaking about what's going on in our life. Now, there are two ballets, Swan Lake and the Nutcracker, that fall outside, that happen after that 1870 line. But when you look at the content of the ballet, they still fit into the parameters of what we consider a Romantic era ballet. So when we're looking at what's going on in time, like what's literally going on in society during that time, the French Revolution is going on. And this is encouraging a shape in try that again. This is encouraging people to reevaluate the political landscape. Do we want a monarchy? Do we want a democracy? Do we want feudal lords? How do we want things to happen? France is bankrupt because they've been investing in the American Revolution. So the monarchy is living one way and the people of France are living a different way, in part because the royal coffers have been depleted. There is a drought going on, so people are thirsty. There's also cattle disease going on, so the meat is not great also, so people are hungry. And then we have this reign of terror where 2,000 people are executed, and a number of the French aristocrats and the artists leave France and go into other parts of Europe. Now, remember, in order for art form to be classical, it has to have that funding, right? The monarchy has been funding ballet, and if the monarchy is leaving, if the aristocrats are leaving, that's also going to change how the art form is supported. We do see those characteristic techniques, those characteristics of classical ballet mentioned earlier, that turnout, that pointing of the foot, which is that stretching of the ankle, and that vertical alignment. But more specifically, during the Romantic era, we see an extreme focus on technique. We also see a shift to the phantasm. So the characters on the stage are going to be nymphs and fairies and other woodland creatures. So we're not going to see gods and goddesses, but we are going to see other mythological creatures. We're also going to see people paying homage to where they come from. So the scenery is going to be, rather than being Mount Olympus and so forth, or under the sea, it's going to be a town or a village. And you're going to see maybe the colors of their flags or other things that say this is of this community depicted in the scenery and in the music for ballet. We see increased turnout. So if you looked at that video in your resource, they talk about how the turnout was only like a little bit of an angle, in part because they had heels on, but now we have the ballet shoe, which is allowing for the turnout to be more intense. So getting closer to that 180. We see a shift to men as partners. So male presenting bodies were the focal point in ballets before this, even at times playing female roles, but now we see the male shift to the partner. He's there to help the woman jump higher or to catch her and so forth, rather than being the focal point. We also see the introduction of the ballet shoe in the 1860s. With the increased technology in relation to the gas lighting, we see this on stage as it's creating that atmosphere of otherworldliness. So we see dim lights on stage. We see smoke, we see trap doors, we see wiring that attaches to the dancers at their waist so that when the dancer goes up on point, she can seem like she's hovering and floating away because she's attached to wiring. We see lighter costuming, which gives the dancers more mobility, that focus on the ballerina, and the ballerina representing this supernatural being. Because once again, in the real world, the world outside of the studio, the world outside of the stage, it's people are not having a great time. So the point of the ballet at this point is to think about, what will life be in another situation? What will life be after I get through this point? One of the famous ballets during this time, and there's a link to this resource on your resource page, is Giselle. Here's some information about it if you would like to watch it. People that come up during this time is Filippo Taglioni and his daughter, Fanny Elssler, August Bournonville, and Carlo Blais. So Filippo was a dancer, an artist, a ballet master. He choreographed a very, very famous ballet during that time and was the instructor for his daughter, which gave her a bit of a upper hand, but he was also known to be a very strict dancer and instructor. So we see that there's a Marie Taglioni, and Fanny Elssler is her rivalry. And as mentioned earlier in the semester, the value of ballet, the value of dance is different at different times. So I thought that it was really wonderful to find out that when Fanny Elssler came to the US and dance, it was so important to the US government that Congress actually shut down. Congress shut down during that day so that everybody in Congress could go see her perform. Carlo Blais comes up because this idea of not just doing the thing, but teaching and writing about it so that it can be there for future generations. And we see this in his body of work. August Bournonville was at the Royal Academy, and he goes back to Copenhagen. And I bring him up because while the Romantic era, the information I gave was speaking about ballet in France. But when he goes back to Copenhagen, when he's there in Denmark, we don't see as an extreme of a shift in the way that dancing is being done. And some people believe that is in part because the gender roles were more balanced in Danish culture than in some other societies. So in France, men were jumping higher and women had to play this type of role that they believe was aligned with how the women's role in society. But in Danish society, there was a more balanced space between the sexes, and therefore the dances were also balanced. Jumping to our next era, the Ballet Russe, because as people are leaving France, they're going to these different areas. Russia is one of those spaces. So in Russia, we see, or because of the time in Russia where ballet gets to grow, we see increased speed and difficulty. We see the creation of a new shoe. This new shoe allows for more speed. We see the libretto being used as a way to build more cohesion between the choreographer and the musician. And we see the ballet grow into the four sections that we know now: the adage, the female variation, the male variation, and the grand allegro. One of the ballets that comes up is the Rite of Spring. And here's the information you see on the slide for the Rite of Spring. There's a link to it in the resource. And I bring this up because the Rite of Spring tells a story. There's scenery, there's music, there's costuming. So fits the definition of a ballet, but does not fit the definition of classical ballet. When you look at the technique, the dancers are in parallel. They're not using vertical alignment. But there is a storyline, and this storyline connects to Russian folklore. So Nijinsky and Stravinsky have decided to lean into Russian folklore that predates Christianity. And ballet is very much linked to that idea of ascending and releve, is very much linked to ascending to heaven. Well, Rite of Spring is about a tradition, a custom that predates Christianity in Russia. So there is a storyline. And although the dancers were trained in classical ballet movement, what you see is very different than classical ballet. This is also another experience of something not being received very well when it was done, but being something that we look back to, because the Rite of Spring is said to have given birth to Expressionism in Europe, which gives birth to the modern dance that we know now. So it is successful, but when it actually aired, the night that it aired, the premiere, there was a lot of fighting, there was a lot of tomatoes thrown, and a whole lot of it was a riot. Like, they literally describe it as a riot. So it wasn't successful in that moment, but is something that has later since become the thing that we look towards. As we talk about Russia specifically in the Ballet Russe and things that we have gained from Russia in relation to ballet, in relation to movement, I want to pay homage to the Tall Chiefs, because she did dance with Balanchine, who we're getting into next, and Balanchine is from Russia. So I wanted to include this document because, or the link to this documentary because, well, you know what? I'm not going to tell you. You got the link right there, so you can see it for yourself. So Balanchine, Russian-born, accomplished choreographer that worked with the New York City Ballet. He preferred contemporary music, and it is said that he preferred contemporary music because the instructors he had were very informed by jazz. So this is why I say that we're not looking at dance as this form came in and this form came in, this form came, because that's not how it works. Dance is not linear. There are circles that overlap. So this person that did a whole lot of work in the ballet space was very much informed by jazz. He's given credit to modernizing ballet in America by increasing the movement vocabulary, putting a very specific emphasis on musicality, athleticism, and the bravura. In the words of the wonderful Brenda Dixon Godchild, he fused ballet's cool aloofness with the Africanist aesthetic of cool. So we talked about that aesthetic of cool specifically with the Ashanti Henny and the big parasol. Like, even in intense situations, the Ashanti Henny is cool. So that essence of cool that is embedded in jazz is connected to that essence of cool that is the Ashanti Henny, right? So Balanchine comes in and he adds syncopation to the movement. He adds angular arm movements. He adds a flex wrist, and he adds displaced hips. So what we're talking about is the breaking of that line, because in ballet, there's an emphasis or there's value placed in a straight line. But what Balanchine is doing is he's breaking that line. Because if you extend your arm right now and you flex your wrist, meaning you bend your wrist, you'll see that line breaks. So he's adding texture, a different type of texture, to the ballet performance. When you do this last assignment, you'll see that there not only is the video for the assignment, but there are also 2 videos that talk about why dancers feel inclined to or like Balanchine's choreographies. If you have any questions, concerns, and so forth, please remember to email me via the Canvas platform so that you can get that response and apply it so that you can do well on your assignment. And that's it. Take care.